What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Cinema Wave Podcast. We are here this time with a review. This is the spoiler review of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. This is the first Planet of the Apes movie since 2017's War of the Planet of the Apes. I am one of your hosts. My name is Darian Scalamoni. I am joined this time by Vinny Albano.
Hello. It's a pleasure to be here.
And this review, as I just said, is going to be spoiler heavy. So the non-spoiler review, you can check out on our YouTube channel. It's Culture Wave. That was hosted by me. It's a shorter episode. Just give my non-spoiler thoughts and my score at the end. So you guys can check that out if you haven't seen the movie yet. But if you guys have seen Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes or you don't really care about spoilers, this is going to be the review for you. So you guys have been warned. This is going to be a full-blown spoiler review and discussion of the movie. Okay? So Vinny and I were very excited for this movie. This is one that we were excited to review together, as we're both pretty big fans of the Planet of the Apes movies, the most recent trilogy that came in the 2010s. I believe Rise was in the 2010s as well, right? 2011?
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yes,
so all the 2010s, but the Apes franchise goes way back into the 1960s, and there's been other films like the Tim Burton ones in the 2000s and a bunch of other crazy stuff. So my first question for you, really just off the top, is have you seen any of the previous ones before the 2010s, and what about the 2010s trilogy in particular made you so attracted to this story and going into Kingdom?
Yeah, so I have not seen any of the originals. However, I know a lot about it because my family just they grew up on the originals and they would tell me about it, or they would show clips to me, and they would kind of almost act like it was superior. But I am a big fan of the 2010s trilogy. I grew up with it, so it's hard to say how I got into it. I just kind of naturally found my way. I've seen all three of them actually in theaters. Despite the first one, I was very young at the time. I still did see it in theaters. I eventually rewatched it when I was later and much older. But I adore them. I actually really enjoy them. I think they're great action films, and films that also have a lot of great social, sociology type messagery around the subject matter in the film. And it's really they're just epic films. So I was really excited going into this one. However, I was hesitant because Matt Reeves is not involved anymore. So I was a little hesitant. I was a little afraid that they were just going to milk this for more money, and it's just going to be like, oh, now we're a mini series. Oh, we'll have a mini series, and we'll have 3 other films, and we'll have a bunch of spin-offs as well. But I was pleasantly surprised by this film.
Yeah, I think that I agree with you. So this is one of, a lot of people talk about some of the best trilogies of all time, and the original Star Wars is up there. People say the Lord of the Rings films, the Captain America films. But Planet of the Apes, I feel like, is one of those, not only the trilogy, the 2010s one, but the franchise as a whole is always slept on. And I never really understood why, because I thought all the ones that were done in the 2010s were really well-intentioned and really well done, especially the Matt Reeves ones. Not that I don't like Rise, the first film, but I do think it's probably the weakest out of the first 3, my personal opinion. But
no, for sure.
I also, like you, was hesitant, especially because we were 7 years removed from the last film, but even more so in terms of the actual storyline. This film takes place, it's vague in terms of the details, but it's centuries later. So we don't know how, or generations later, I'm sorry. So we don't know exactly how far removed from the end of the Rise, Dawn, War films that we are. We do know, obviously, that Caesar is still playing a very major role within the universe, and the ideology that kind of came with his character and going forward. And I thought that was a very smart way for them to sort of link the two audiences, whether you are somebody that had seen those other 3 films. Because I'm aware of some people that I've been talking to that are excited for this movie. And they're like, yeah, I have to catch up on them. They still hadn't even seen the ones from the 2010s, or maybe they've only seen the one with James Franco and John Lithgow from 2011. And then there's the other ones with, and they've managed to get a lot of really great actors also involved in the franchise.
Oh, yeah.
As humans and as apes. I mean, you have Woody Harrelson's been in this franchise now, Gary Oldman, Kerry Russell. You had Steve Zahn playing an ape, and of course Andy Serkis with a remarkable performance over the 3 films of Caesar. But this film, you get 0 carryover characters. It's a whole new sort of blank slate.
Yeah.
And I was hesitant for that reason, because I was like, they really got me in terms of the story and the characters that we met, and different apes throughout that trilogy from the 2010s. And now we're going to start fresh. So with you, what were your initial thoughts when the film, because the film also opens up basically on like an homage to that trilogy. So how did that make you feel? And in terms of the film, just in terms of like pacing and the film as a whole, general kind of broad thoughts. And again, this is spoilers, so you can spoil things.
Yeah.
What were your overall kind of first thoughts on Kingdom?
Yeah, so it opens up with the death of Caesar and that almost funeral ceremony. They burn him, and we see his son in that scene. I thought that was a perfect opener because I was also under the impression that they were just going to kind of forget about the original trilogy and they were just going to try to, like, this film does its own thing and I appreciate it for that. But also I thought they were just going to like pretend like the original or the first trilogy was just not there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But no, like Caesar, like you mentioned, he is a big part of this film. And I think it was really appropriate that they put him at the beginning. They kept that his ideology and that ceremony, that funeral that they have, because it lays the groundwork for the rest of the film, as then generations later he becomes this almost messianic figure, which I adored that. I was like, that below, it's crazy. And I love that almost like social commentary they had where, you know, no matter like intelligent beings, they will take the words of, you know, something like a religion, and Caesar and his like words became, like I said, like almost like a messianic like telling, like a religion of sorts. And then we see factions taking that and mingling with it and using it in their own aggressive and assaultive ways. So I found that so fascinating, and I love the world that they built here. I think the film was just overall epic. My expectations were like in the middle, but they were blown out of the water. There's a lot of action in this film. Honestly, more action than I was expecting, and it's really well done. It's a gorgeous film. The VFX are amazing. I have a few nitpicks when it comes to pacing. There's the section where they arrive on Proximus Caesar's kind of labor camp, and it's that nighttime sequence when they first go into the fallout shelter, and when William H. Macy's character comes and she kills him. That whole sequence, I don't know, it felt weird to me. Maybe I was tired because I was really tired going to the theater. Like that was like, you know, that was the first time in the movie when like everything
goes dark.
Yeah, everything was dark. So maybe I was just really tired, but I felt the pacing there was a little weird. And I guess we'll go more in detail into that later on because I do want to speak about certain scenes and why it felt that way. But overall, this film was epic. It blew my expectations out of the water.
Yeah, I think I do agree in terms of like if I'm going to be nitpicky. I don't think it's a perfect movie, but I do think it's still definitely a worthy installment within this new framework of what they're doing with the Apes films. And there's always been speculation by a lot of people, and similar to you, I've never seen any of the previous Apes movies besides the more recent trilogy. But there's always been a clamoring from like diehard Apes fans, and they do exist, like people that are like huge fans of this franchise, similar to like people like who are huge Star Wars junkies and things like that want to see them basically find their way back to rebooting the Charlton Heston Planet of the Apes movie, where like it ends with him like realizing that it was human society all along and the apes took over. So but with this film in particular, you touched upon it a little bit. The thing that I love the most about this movie is not only the relaying back to the sort of importance and the symbolic nature of who Caesar was, but the challenging ideologies between two different versions of what they believed Caesar was trying to say. Yeah. And I thought that was a really unique way to challenge that and even have the audience so many times going back and forth and pondering, who am I rooting for right now? Because I don't know exactly, like it makes sense what the apes are saying. It makes sense what May was saying. It makes sense what the other apes want. Like it was hard to sort of take a stand so to speak, but it was really important that they challenged the dichotomies of the characters and the audience members at the end of the movie to be like, who am I rooting for right now?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
as human beings, you're like, well, of course, like you go and you're like, oh, well, I mean, you hope the humans win, but at the same time, like Caesar was such a beloved character. And these characters, though, you do sort of find love for certain characters and apes throughout this film. It's not the same as those films with Caesar, where you see Caesar as a baby chimp sort of grow into this version of himself where he's like, no, like I can stand side by side with the humans because I do realize their importance and I was raised by a human. And these apes are not of that kind. And so much so that they challenge the whole belief that humans are good by calling them echoes and all the different sort of things that, like you said, we'll break down for sure. I want to talk about the performances. For the people who maybe haven't seen these Apes movies, if you guys are checking this out for the first time, they use motion capture for all the performances of the apes. And Andy Serkis, like we said, I thought like Andy Serkis should have been nominated for an Oscar probably all 3 times for his role as Caesar, certainly in the final 2 films. And I wished they did like an honorary Oscar or something because his performances were remarkable. But in this film, you have all new actors coming into these roles. And the 3 in particular, well, I guess there's 4 in particular. I am even 5, I guess, that kind of stick out as the main apes that you kind of pay attention to throughout the film. So you have Owen Teague is our lead ape named Noah, who the whole entire story sort of bases itself around. And Noah, the film opens up with him and his 2 friends, where I don't want to mess up the names because I did this before we started recording. So Suna, played by Lydia Peckham, and Anaya, played by Travis Jeffrey. They are all friends. They obviously grew up in the same clan. They grew up as baby chimps, and now they're sort of coming into adulthood, and they're going through this ritual that they want to do. They have to collect these eggs. And it's a whole big thing. So they all do a really great job. But also Peter Macon, who does Raka, who comes the orangutan character that comes in later in the film. Like what a loving and just great overall performance. Like it's so funny. It's like if this was like in another sort of drama where it wasn't CGI driven, it's like that would be like the lovable, at times affable, at times like really sly sort of character that you'd be like, oh, I could see this person like garnering awards interest. Like that's how good he is, sort of embodying this ape. And then the one you also alluded to was Proximus Caesar, who's played by Kevin Durand, and very, in the short amount of time we get with Proximus Caesar, he does a very good job of sort of making his commanding nature on screen. So what did you think about the performances of the apes in particular before we go to the human characters?
Yeah, I specifically wanted to talk about Raka. I think everyone did an excellent job, and the character of Noah was a character that I really felt for throughout the entire film. And I think I was a little afraid too going into this that they weren't going to meet the standard that Caesar set as a main character. Like he's the GOAT, bro. He's the GOAT, right? So I was a little afraid, but no, Noah lives up to that. And his character arc throughout the film and the performance that the actor puts on via motion capture is incredible. But Raka was like, that was my guy. Like there's specifically performance wise, the moment when they find May like can talk, when she's like, I have a name, and his jaw drops. Everyone in the theater started dying.
Yeah, my
laughing.
theater too.
And I started dying laughing because it was perfect. Yes. It was perfect.
It's like slapsticky, which is so cool to see also done through like CGI and motion capture. Like getting to see these human beings embodying these apes that are doing human reactions. Like it's very clever the way they do it.
Yeah, and his whole performance was just perfect, like delivery wise and just the essence of the character. And when he ends up dying, I felt that, we only knew him for a short period of time, and for him to die, that, and for an audience member to feel that, I put a lot of that into not only the writing but the performance of that character. I think it was just really well executed. Proximus Caesar was also another standout for me. The tension and the overall, like, he has this presence to him that is incredibly intimidating, and it is something, I forget the villain of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, the second one.
Koba is like, to me, it's like, and I do think they're great performances here too. But like to me, it's like Caesar and like Koba's right here. Like Toby Kebbell played the role of Koba in that film, and Koba was a really fucked up character when you think about it.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of Koba though, like in that intimidating sense, and how Koba was able to rally other apes into his side, and same with Max or Proximus. But yeah, no, I enjoyed the performances and a lot of the characters. If you want to talk about that,
yeah, I think that the cool thing with Proximus was that his character is, and I do agree in terms of the way he's able to sort of flip some of the apes. It has a Koba like, but the thing with Koba was like Koba was so chaotic. It reminds me of like, have you ever seen Midnight Cowboy? Like,
No,
so it reminds me literally of like Ratso Rizzo in an ape, like a nefarious, like losing his mind, drugged out, like crazy fucking lunatic.
Yeah.
And with this, Proximus and he embraces a very stoic nature to him. He's very regal. He sits on a throne. He wears a crown. And the scene in particular where, which you see at the end of the first trailer for the film, where he screams, "What a wonderful day!" It reminded me so much of the scene in The Warriors.
Yeah.
Where he's can you dig it? Like, I was like, holy shit, man. Like, he's got that presence in order to make you feel like everything he resembles somebody that the apes would listen to, and that makes sense why they would put somebody in power that was of Proximus's nature. And I also think that's a testament to Kevin Durand, who's kind of like, he's been in a lot of things. He was in X-Men Origins, and he was in a bunch of other films in the 2000s and things like that. But he's already having a big year. He was in Abigail. Now he's got a big role in Apes. So it's cool to see like a journeyman in the industry sort of getting his chance to shine in this.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Noah, because I know before we started recording, you wanted to talk about Noah too. So Noah is played by Owen Teague, who is known. You would know him if you saw his face, but you don't see his face in this film.
Yeah.
But he plays Patrick in It. He's in Bloodline, the series on Netflix. He was in Eileen, which came out last year. So he's been getting a lot more opportunity. And now he's leading an Apes film, kind of, again, taking on that mantle that was, and that sort of I'm losing the word right now. Just basically the stature of a lead ape in the franchise. That's what he's taking over. So what did you think about Owen Teague's performance as Noah?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, I really enjoyed him, and I think he was able to get on the same standard that Caesar was, which was something I was hesitant going into this. I want to talk about just Noah specifically as a character, because his arc is something I really appreciate, because at the beginning he demonstrates skills of confidence, like trying to get the egg from the higher nest, but he is reckless, and his recklessness cost the clan, with the Proximus Caesar's men following his horse back to their place. And he almost has this I don't know, I feel like he feels like kind of like a scaredy cat in moments, or he's reckless, like very much like a kid. And seeing his journey to the end and having that final fight with Proximus, calling the Eagles and letting the Eagles poke him to death as he falls to his death, was just so like, yeah, like that's the essence of Caesar is there, where it's like, okay, now we have a leader to lead this clan of apes into their newfound freedom. And I adored that. And also, while I'm talking about Noah as a character, Noah, his name and the significance of his name, it standed out to me because immediately I was like, all right, Noah's Ark. Like, there's got to be a biblical reference in some sort of way. But how are they going to, like, is there going to be a great flood? And it didn't hit me until after it happened that there actually is a great flood in this film, and he is the guy to refuge and bring his people to safety amidst this great flood. And that is so clever. I love the fact that they were able to implement that, and the symbolic biblical tale into his story. That's why him being named
his
Noah.
Namesake. Yeah. And it's cool because you get that moment where he actually directs it like right at May,
Hmm.
where he asks all these questions. He's like, I will help you only if you tell truths. And then he's like, is water going to be able to take out, like wash away what they're seeking? And so he's already aware of what he's going to do.
Yeah.
And it is really cool how the Apes franchise is able to sort of interweave these really unique ideas that come from our history and place them in this whole dynamic science fiction universe, where even things like Caesar and William H. Macy's character talks about how he goes, all of these apes seem interested in is Roman history, which goes back to the whole thing with Caesar too.
Yeah.
And I just think it's great. They're very clever in terms of the way they navigate the different ways they have their characters interact, and apes and humans interact throughout all the films. They've done a really good job of sort of doing that throughout all the different time periods and all the different characters that they have throughout the franchise. The flood. Let's talk about the flood scene. Let's move towards the back half of the film first. We're talking about the details of the movie. So obviously, like we say, these apes, they meet May. She plays a significant role. She's the most significant human character in the film, played by Freya Allan, who I know she's been in some things, but I haven't seen her. I think she does a really good job here. And balancing so much of the human element on her shoulders, because for a large part of the movie, she's the only human that we see. But in terms of sort of that epic scale of the back end of the plan to get into this vault, which Proximus has been trying to get into for months, trying to seek out whatever may be on the other side of it, how did you feel about the execution and the plan to sort of go in that way, and sort of what happened from the moment that we had May and Noah sort of coming together in that room and they're trying to rely on one another, and the unique nature that comes with the trust between ape and human?
Yeah, I will say the execution of that scene, like I mentioned before, I don't know if it was just because I'm tired or what, but I feel like the pacing kind of like started to lose me just in that section, but it does make up for it, because when the vault opens up and those floodgates break and it's just and it's all out chaos, that is probably one of my favorite scenes in the entire film. Speaking about the execution between the humans and the apes, I find it very interesting. It's a different twist than the previous three films, where in the previous three films we watched humans be a significant part, and humans were pretty much the enemy. But like we had, Dawn, where Koba was the enemy, but in war, the humans were the enemies. And then now, to humans being mostly unintelligent beings, you have May, but she's an outlier. And same with William H. Macy's character. They're outliers. And now seeing them almost switch places is really interesting. And, you could probably dive really deep into it and start going onto a metaphorical level and whatnot. And I'm for sure it is there. I'm not going to talk about that. I don't really.
We have to analyze the film a little more. We both saw the movie today as of the recording, by the way. So we have to sort of dive into some other things. I think it's unique that you bring up the whole aspect of how the humans seem like the enemy with the exception of Dawn. And there are obviously, which you alluded to anyway, there are antagonistic humans within Dawn, Gary Oldman's character sort of in particular. In juxtaposition with like the Jason Clarke character and the Kerry Russell character. But I don't know, like if you know off the top of your head or anything, but like Dawn is probably my favorite of the films. And I think it's because you're getting that challenging aspect of ape versus ape and the different clans and things like that. Which also kind of reminded me of like Avatar. I don't know if that's like the new Avatar movie, Way of Water, because
I haven't seen it.
Okay, so it's like it's very much playing in the same boat of like these different clans, and they're all obviously Na'vi, but they have their different ways of life. And Noah's clan is the Eagle clan, like you talked a little bit about, where their whole entire thing is that they sing to eagles and they treat eagles like they're equal, which is a very unique idea that we haven't seen. Sort of, obviously, we play within the apes within all these movies, but we haven't seen sort of the introduction of other animals. There's the cool scene with the zebras as well, which is a small kind of thing. But I did really appreciate when we got to the point of apes versus apes, and you see it throughout the movie. But like the stuff when the in the encampment, I was interested in, but then I do agree with you. I think the pacing sort of went in an interesting direction, and I think the movie as a whole has interesting pacing problems because it is a long movie. It's 2 hours and 25 minutes, but they also have to now reestablish something that is taking place generations after these other films that people had seen.
Yeah.
I do think there was probably room to speed it up. I don't think you had to cut a crazy amount out of this movie, maybe 10 minutes. But I do think in terms of the execution, like the film is a deeper dive into an origin story, right? Like we're basically starting over with all these new characters and it's a new introduction, but I think it does a better job of getting us into this world than sort of Rise did. I think Rise takes its time to get us to where we want to get to. And that's why I give kudos to the way that Wes Ball sort of decided how he was going to direct this movie. And I've never seen any of his films, but he did the Maze Runner movies. And I don't know if you were aware of this, but he did he was supposed to do this film. I think it was for Warner Brothers. It was called Mouse Guard. And it's based on either a comic series or a graphic novel or novels. And it's about like, think about like Planet of the Apes, but like for mice. Like literally that's what it is. Okay. And he did motion capture with a bunch of people. The film was like 80% done and then they scrapped it.
Oh, really?
And he was doing like the test footage got released and people were like, how the fuck did this movie not get made? And he got this movie on the back of that. Like, I think, or maybe it wasn't Warner Brothers, whatever company it was, it's not the company that does the Apes movies, because they were the ones that kind of took the opportunity and were like, we should like sign this guy and like give him the reins to the franchise, which I don't know if he's going to come on to do the next one, but the movie's obviously already super successful through opening weekend. So right now when we're recording this, it is the Friday that the film came out, but it's projected to be making between 55 and 60 million domestic, which is great. That's already like double what The Fall Guy made, which has Ryan Gosling in the lead. So it has staying power. But I think what I wanted to talk to you more about is in terms of sort of the story overall, and what did you think in sort of comparatively to the other films? Again, it has different characters, but what did you think in terms of like, I'm not telling you to rank all of them, but like maybe your favorite apes and where this kind of compares to that?
It's hard to say, to be honest, because I haven't seen the previous three. It's been a minute. You know, it's definitely been a minute. I've always loved War. That was my favorite one because the nuance between Woody Harrelson's performance in that film is incredible. And the nuance between Woody Harrelson and Caesar and their conflict is so like nail biting throughout that entire film. It also has one of the most epic sequences, I think, out of the trilogy, being the avalanche scene. And this honestly really came to that standard. And this kind of leads me into what I also wanted to talk to you about, being Wes Ball and his just overall presentation, direction, every decision he made on this film. I also have not seen any of his films. I haven't seen the main actually I have seen Maze Runner 1 and 2, but I don't remember them. And I don't remember them being like anything too special. But he really did a great job with this. I think every action scene and there's a lot of action. I was pleasantly surprised with that. And just the overall vibe of the film and how he executes that in his presentation is beautiful. It's beautiful. There's the action is thrilling, like genuinely thrilling, and it's accompanied by a great orchestral like score. And the score is not anything special. There wasn't like any like standout tracks that I was like, whoa. But for me, it just was really riveting during the action sequences because it really hit that note of like, this is an epic action series. And I think he just does a lot of clever things. Going back to the flood scene where there's so many clever shots. It just looks beautiful from beginning to end. The movie just looks beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
It's so gorgeous. And that's another thing too. I don't know if we become desensitized to visual effects or vice versa, where we've been seeing a lot of films that are being pushed to, they're being pushed to these FX houses super late, and they're just giving them really tight and early deadlines. And I think Marvel has suffered with this the most, where they're just pumping shit out to the point where now their VFX people are they can't keep up with it. So, you know, we have stuff like Thor Love and Thunder, where
there's a lot of issues with the visual effects.
Yeah. Sure. But this is like, woo, yeah, this looks great. This movie looks beautiful. And sorry, my thoughts are like kind of all over the place.
No, you're good.
Just that flood scene and all the action scenes and everything. I think Wes Ball needs to be acclaimed, or what's the word that I'm trying to look for? I give him applause. That's the word. I give him applause for everything he did, because answering your question, his execution here it surpassed my expectations. So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because I wanted to look up sort of when this film went into development, going off the point you just made. So the film was in development as early as April 2019, and it got a May 2024 release. Obviously, there was COVID in between there. Obviously, there were strikes in between there. But I do think it's a testament to what you were just saying in terms of like giving the proper time to let your story sort of play out and giving a rest for the franchise, which is now a welcomed return, because people do revere those 3 films from the 2010s, and now you have 7 years in between War for the Planet of the Apes and Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes to sort of now kick off this new not only trilogy, but I had read right before we started recording that when they initially set out to do all these films, they wanted to do a 9-film like epic. Like they wanted to do 3 trilogies, and they were like, well, we'll see how the first one does. And now they're like, we're already on 4, and 4 seems to be doing well. So it looks like they might get through that and maybe again end up by the end to where the original film with Charlton Heston sort of kind of rebooting that and seeing how that goes. But I do think Wes Ball gets a ton of credit for what he was able to do with this film. On the other hand, I will say, and this is kind of going back to a nitpicky thing, because again, I don't think the movie's perfect. I do think, though, there are some clever and unique ways that they're able to interweave, like we talked about, those nods to Roman history and the things of biblical proportions and the societal political nature of what sort of happens within this world. There are times where the movie falls into very formulaic sort of treading of the story and of the characters. And it's so funny and ironic that I brought up Avatar, because I didn't take a look to see, but Josh Friedman, who's the screenwriter of this film, actually got the story by credit for Avatar: The Way of Water. And to me, they like very much feel at a lot of moments in the movie like they're walking the same path. That's an interesting thing to me, because now I'm like, is this the only thing that's in his wheelhouse? He's also written the Apple TV Plus sci-fi show Foundation. He developed and he was the creator of Snowpiercer, the show. So he also very much works in these sci-fi environments, which he feels comfortable in. He did Terminator Dark Fate. So he definitely loves sci-fi. He has an obvious attachment to fantasy and sci-fi. But I do wish the script was a little stronger. I think that the character acting was able to elevate some of those scenes in particular. And there's a lot more done in terms of the physicality, which is, I guess, always sort of comes out because it's motion capture. But I think more of the heavy lifting is done with the physicality of the roles rather than the script. I don't know if you felt similar in terms of the story or something like that.
Yeah, I actually do want to comment on that, because I agree with that. I do agree with that. It definitely falls into its tropes, even from its imagery. A lot of the time, it falls into its tropes and cliches. And I feel it's really hard, because I love a lot of these traditional archetypes and traditional imagery and symbolism and whatnot. For example, when Noah gets to the point in his hero's journey where he has to cross the threshold, what does he do? He goes through a dark tunnel and comes out the other end. We've seen that in 100 other films. Yeah. Like the first one that comes to mind is The Fugitive, when oh my god, Han Solo,
Harrison Ford.
When Harrison
just
Ford,
a brain fart.
Yeah, when Harrison Ford goes into the tunnel and comes out the other end. But anyhow, it definitely falls into the cliches, and it's hard to say, because it's like, I love that, I adore that, I like, I've grown up and I am a story writer myself, so it's like, I don't know if it's like too cliche if I should be like, oh, I've seen this a million times before, or if like, oh, this is such a nod to the, because I like these traditional stories. But no, I totally agree. It is, it falls into its tropes. I know I've kind of said that like 3 times now, but yeah, I think another example, which was in that section of the film where I felt the pacing was lacking when they get to the labor camp, there is a scene, and although I do like the physicality of Proximus's character, that exposition scene at the dinner table was just, I don't know if the audience is gonna hate me for this, but I don't know, it just not hit for me.
The scene with him, Caesar, and May, and William H. Macy, Troy Athan.
Yeah. When they're at the dinner table, it didn't hit for me because I get what they were trying to do, where it's like you have these characters are put in a position where now, it's like that storytelling where bomb under the table, like, right? It's that tension of like Proximus can kill him at any moment. He's he's the demanding power in this scene. But it's also like I Dungeon Master campaign, a D&D campaign, and I literally did that exact scene. Like dinner table, like with the villain, you know what I mean? So it's like I've seen it a lot where it's just like, and also I use that because I feel like the exposition he was saying in that scene wasn't too far off of what we already knew.
Yeah, I actually wish in that scene in particular, sorry to cut you off, I think it would have been more effective if it's just the two of them. I thought the implementation of the humans in that scene was almost too much like it was trying, and again, I think Owen Teague does such a good job. Like his facial expressions as Noah are so well done.
Oh yeah.
Well done. But there's like a look on his face, and then you see that Anaya, that's the character's name, right? His friend, Anaya is his ape, Noah's ape friend, right?
Yep,
is in there as his like servant, and they make eye contact with one another. I don't know if you caught that, but
I did not caught that.
He's the one, because he hadn't seen Anaya once he was in the camp. Yeah. So when he's brought up there, he makes eye contact with him, and Anaya looks like really sad and walks away, and that's Anaya that he's and he's like looking back like this is my friend that's always like very outspoken and very silly, and now he's like reserved and depressed and obviously tortured and traumatized. So I think if you have that scene with just the two apes in particular, and he's like, no, like sit, eat, do whatever you want. Like I know you have a very special connection with this. Maybe even if just May is not in the room, because Trevathan doesn't really do anything in that scene anyway. But regardless, like there's such that looming like. There's a word for it. It's just like it's like the villain being very self-aware and being like, ha ha ha, look at the situation I'm putting you in. Yeah. And it's like you wish that wasn't the way that they decided to execute that scene, because it would have felt it would have had a lot more tension sort of baked into it if it was just between Proximus and Noah. So I do agree with you in terms of that scene. It kind of does beat you over the head a little bit with being like, you're supposed to fear this guy. And it's like, we know that already. Like, obviously, like you can tell with his, like the theatrics of who he is as a leader, and the fact that there's a whole rambunctious sort of nature in which all the apes go crazy when he's swinging up to the top of the mountaintop and he's telling them, we can take this down. Like you already get that sense in the scene prior, so you don't need to sort of beat your audience over the head with it a second time. So I do agree with you there. Yeah,
like I appreciate what they were going for, but although I really enjoyed the film overall, there's a few scenes like that where it's like, I appreciate what they're going for. I understand what they're going for, but they could have just changed just little things that could have made the execution a lot better. But instead they kind of fall into what you said, like formulaic ground. I just came up with an idea. What if, let's say, instead of May and Macy's character being there, what if it's like Noah's mom?
Yeah.
Right? All of a sudden you put Noah's mom at the dinner table, and suddenly like Noah walks in and it's his mom with Proximus. And then it's like, holy shit, right? That for me, I'm like, that would have been a lot more like tension building. Yeah. Like, oh my God. And they already established that relationship with the mother. So that would have been like, I don't know. I'm just like pitching ideas
No,
out
I
there. But
totally
you know
get
what I'm
it.
trying to
I
say?
think
Yeah.
I just think it's unique that you're having a situation in which Proximus is just telling Noah not to trust humans in front of humans to try to make
Yeah.
both Noah and May feel uncomfortable. And it's like that shouldn't be what you want out of the scene. What you want
Yeah.
is you want it to feel like Noah is going to be on your side and you can't trust humans because in the back of Noah's head, like even his father's teachings, which is a very unique thing that isn't touched upon enough. His father's teachings was that humans are not good. Like that should have been beaten into him. And obviously there's a different attitude that Raka's character has, and he gets the whole different viewpoint of Caesar's real teachings. But at the same time, like he's hearing Caesar, he never knew of Caesar, and now Proximus Caesar, who takes his namesake, is there telling him you can't trust humans. And you kind of get that. And I think it's a good opportunity now to jump into the kind of tail end of the film to sort of wrap up the review. But obviously they get through the vault. May steals this like data encryption disk and she kills an ape. She shoots an ape.
Oh, yes.
Now
yeah.
the ape is there to try to the ape basically has I'm going to keep forgetting her name and I feel bad. The female ape. Where are we?
Suna?
Where are we?
Is it Suna?
I think it is Suna.
Yeah.
I hate Suna. So the henchman ape basically has Suna hostage, is about to kill. It's like and Proximus is like, you need to make your pick. Is it ape or is it human? And she kills the henchman ape. And then you fast forward to the end, basically the end of the film where she comes back and they're having a conversation and he's like, you humans will never stop until you get everything. And she's like, this was our land. Like where I took you was man-made things. Despite the fact that she needed the apes to get there in the first place. She needed the help of Noah and of Suna and of Anaya to get to where she needed to get to ultimately. And you get that brilliant shot. And I do think there are little moments of symbolism throughout the film. I love when they get in the vault and they're going through the books.
Yeah.
And they see the monkeys in the cages, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't even imagine. Like, imagine being an ape and not understanding that that's what you were beforehand, and then you're like, they had us in fucking cages?
Yeah.
Like, and they were pointing at us, and they were saying, look, the monkey dance.
Yeah.
It's like, I could fucking kill you right now with my bare hands. Going from there to then the end of the film where he's having a very serious conversation with her to try to understand which path is she going to decide to walk, May, in the future of human civilization. Meanwhile, she's got a fucking gun hidden behind her back, and you don't know if she's going to shoot Noah or not. Yeah. So I wanted to kind of get your take on that and sort of where do you see us going from here? Because I would say there's like a 93% chance we get a sequel to this movie.
Yeah.
It would have to. It's already off to a really great start, and I think they're going to continue the franchise. So where do you think they go from here? What did you think of sort of the wrap up and the ending with the whole May versus the Apes sort of thing? And then we eventually see that there's humans in an underground bunker. So there's a lot that we can kind of go off by.
It excites me because it's like, it's that world building where it's like, ooh, okay. Now we could go into a lot of different possibilities here. And with them contacting the humans in space, right? So now that brings us towards the original trilogy where, a crashed spaceship. And that establishing like the gray like morality of the human characters and also the apes, but specifically the humans in this instance, in this example, is really fascinating. And even like seeing more of those Fallout-esque shelters would be a really cool, like you mentioned, like other ones, like that would be really cool. Just you could go in a lot of different possibilities. Two more things. The irony also of May's statement, right? Because they're talking and she's like, oh, well, this was man-made before. Like, look, before the man-made, it was their place too. Exactly. Like, that's the thing. The irony of that statement is like, if it wasn't for human over-industrialization that took away natural ecosystems and habitats for these animals, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there were, us humans way back in the day, we lived coexistent with animals. And then we obviously evolved into these hyper intellectual beings that have city skyscrapes and whatnot that vast miles. But before that, it was their land.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's this, they could also play on that commentary of just like cycles of nature and how like every thousands and thousands of years, millions of years, it changes and goes back and changes and goes back.
It's
and changes and goes
recycling
back.
itself over
Yeah.
and over and over again. You're going to get to the same end goal. It's going to be one. It's going to basically be one sort of human or ape trying to eat itself. Like
Yeah.
that's literally what it is. It's just turning over. Like you see in the beginning of Rise, like they're testing on apes, which is like a
Yeah.
real thing that's happened in our society. Like they're testing
Yeah.
on apes. They make them like have these incredible brains, and then they wind up taking over. And now we're gonna start to see sort of the back half of that. But I know you said you had one other thing.
Yeah, so the last other thing, this is more just like conspiracy and like now we're gonna start theory crafting because you mentioned how they speculated, how they mentioned making 9 movies in total, which is a lot. So
it is 9, including the 3 we got previously.
Yeah.
So we got 5 more, but still, yes, it is a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of movies, but that last shot at the end, I might be crazy for this, but that last shot at the end when Noah looks at the stars, I'm like, yo, what if, because we've seen now that these apes, they're highly intellectual now. They've established their own sense of tribalism and conquering and empires now, right? So with that, and with that conquering nature, what if they start going to the stars and start conquering other planets? And who knows, maybe alien societies they took over. And then by the 9th movie, Planet of the Apes becomes Planets of the Apes. Mind blown.
Like you,
I just wrote all the trilogy.
That's
right
it.
here.
I do think, and I know part of it is trying to be funny, but at the same time, like you alluded to before, that first film they send, and there's actually a nod to it. Shout out Screen Crush, love your videos. Every time I watch it, there's always shit where I pick up on. I'm like, I can't believe I didn't see this.
Yeah.
In Rise, they show video footage of like a spacecraft going to Mars, and it's the same markings on the spacecraft that are from the first film from the 60s.
Oh.
So they're trying to recraft everything to sort of make it a roundabout thing. And I do feel similar to you. Like, I hope they don't operate. Basically, I think like Planet of the Apes has the ability to do what Walking Dead fails at doing without having to make all spin-offs and fucking all this shit. Like, they shouldn't have just had one flagship Walking Dead show where they went like 13 seasons. They're like, now we'll go to Paris. Now we'll go to New York. It's like, there was a zombie apocalypse everywhere the whole time. So why did we just stay in Georgia for like the whole entire show? Like with Apes, that's what they can do. I don't know if they don't say exactly where they are in this film. Right?
Yeah, I'm alluded. So for me, I suspect that it's probably still California. San
Okay, because
Francisco.
the first 3 are San Francisco.
Yeah.
And then when at the end of the film, when you see the humans, Deitchen Lockman's character, when she reaches out and they get that satellite signal, they're like, oh, like we're reporting here from Fort Wayne, Indiana. So there are humans obviously still alive. You don't know where they are. We haven't seen a lot of them, like in this film in particular. So, and there weren't a lot of them in Dawn where they were in California. So it would make sense, I guess, if they're still in California, that they're starting to be the extinction of humans, essentially. And there are some more. There are some in the zebra sequence as well. But they have the opportunity to do with whatever they want to do, especially if they have. Yeah. And it would make me think if they have 9 films slated, they have some sort of idea, at least where they want to end up, which I think is a good sign. That's like what Marvel doesn't do anymore. Like they knew with Endgame they were getting to a certain point and they kind of fucked it up after that. But like they were leading up to this certain point. So I do hope, and I think it's good speculation, though it would be silly. Yeah. I can see them doing something that is intergalactic, so to speak, with the humans and the apes. I don't know how they're going to do it. I mean, Fast and Furious said they were going to go to space, and they fucking did. Yeah. So, like, so who knows where they're going to go with it. We'll see. We should get to scores. Yeah. This has been the spoiler discussion, obviously. If you guys have been tuning in and you guys didn't want the movie spoiled, I don't know why you were watching the whole time, but we can give our scores now if you want to give yours first, and we'll wrap up our thoughts. Yeah, I'm giving this a solid 8. Okay. I contemplated on giving it a 9, but I'm gonna
a solid 8. A solid 8.
Okay.
Yes.
I have the exact same score as you. I'm also going to go with an 8. I do think there were a lot of really interesting ways that they're going to go in sort of resetting this universe coming generations after the previous 3 films from the 2010s. I have a lot of faith in some of the characters that they established going forward. Very sad Rock is dead, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully we get some other cool and fun orangutans throughout the years. But I do think kind of putting a lot of this on the backing of Noah, I think was a good choice. I think that Owen Teague, despite him not having, and not that Andy Serkis was like a crazy name anyway, but he had done such memorable motion capture work already as Gollum that he sort of had, and he was such a champion of that technology. It was also cool that apparently with this film, I don't think he's a producer on it, but they did give him like he gave his blessing. Like they showed him this movie before it came out, which I think is really awesome because
that's cool.
There's so much of his DNA in these movies for sure. So yeah, I'm gonna give it an 8 too. I don't know. Did you have any final thoughts on it or
no? Not really. Just overall an epic film. I'm really satisfied.
Do you recommend seeing it in IMAX? I didn't see it in IMAX. I know you did.
I'm gonna be real. IMAX is always a delight. I think the sound system and just the overall bigger image is great. I didn't notice any films that were actually an IMAX aspect ratio though, so I don't even know if they shot any of it on IMAX aspect ratio. Yeah. I'm not sure, but maybe there was a couple scenes. You know, sometimes even it's only like a few minutes of like IMAX
footage. Yeah.
So I say it's you don't have to see an IMAX, but definitely was a pleasant experience.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, guys, that has been our review for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. It is the newest film in the film franchise Planet of the Apes. The first one since 2017's War for the Planet of the Apes. Let us know in the comments what you guys thought about the movie. What you think about the performances, sort of the approach that they're going to take with this film franchise. Do you think they can get 9 movies out of it? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to have a discussion with you guys. Also, if you guys can give this video a like and subscribe to us and hit that bell for alerts. We are Culture Wave Media Network. We have tons of other stuff for you guys. We have things on movies. We have things on TV, things on sports. We have game shows upcoming, reels, bunch of stuff for you guys to look at. So please be sure to keep your lookout. We post new videos every day. Also, you can follow us on social media. We are at Cinema Wave Media and at _Culture Wave Media on Instagram. We're also at Cinema Wave Media on TikTok as well as on Threads, and also Culture Wave on Facebook. And there's a bunch of other stuff upcoming, so please be sure to check out that stuff. I am one of your hosts. My name is Darian Scalamoni.
And I am Vinny Albano.
And we'll see you guys next time.
This is The Culture.